Give you some purpose behind this presentation. If you think you're being brought in here to be recruited by the military, you're wrong, okay? This is an opportunity that I want you to learn about and hear about, because right now you're in a time frame that you're doing a lot of research of what you're going to be doing after Lenape High School. Here at Lenape High School, we were very proud of all of our students that are going on doing a variety of things. We celebrate the 2 diplomas here at Lenape High School. We have the College Hall celebrating where you can go and where you are going and where you have been, right? And that's a big push by all of us, and we want you to do everything you possibly can do, because there's a direct correlation of having a higher education to being more successful in life beyond Lenape High School, okay, and beyond what you want to do. And success is rated by all of you and what you want to do. But I know I've talked to several of you, lots of you, and every single year I've been doing this for 14 years, is that when you come down to your college decisions, and seniors, you're dealing with it right now, juniors, you're going to start looking at different colleges now, going through this past summer if you haven't done any tours already, and you start looking at, what majors are being offered, what they're looking for academically to be accepted. And then you say, I love these 2 schools. I love Clemson, I love LSU, or Rowan and TC&J. But whoever gives me more money, that's where I have to go, because I don't have endless money. I can tell you I'm a product of that myself. When I went through college and I got done, when I went through high school and I went to Rowan University, it was a long, long time ago, 18 years ago. My father worked in a factory. My mother was a nurse. Neither of them went to a higher education. I walked out. They didn't know what we were doing. I was the only one in my family that ever went to college. And I walked out with about $30,000 of debt. $30,000 is nothing now. That took me about 12 to 13 years to pay off nickel and diamond as I went through. It was extremely tough. Plus, then when I got married, my wife, I inherited about $22,000 worth of debt that both of us had to try to pay off. Extremely hard when you're making not as much money to pay those bills off. Now, students, I have 4 daughters that are preparing for this. My first daughter is going to be a freshman, right? And I'm already looking at where and what she can possibly do to try to get opportunities for scholarships. Now you're looking at schools of what I talked about, the Clemson and LSUs or UPenn and Rowan University. You're looking at some schools being $52,000, $62,000, $45,000 per year. Then you're looking at Rowan University in-state, which is one of the cheaper deals you can find, paying about $28,000 per year, right? I don't know about all of you, but I know, some of our demographics. All of us don't have all the money to pay for all this schooling that we want you to do, so you can have a little bit better chance of past Lenape High School. If you're walking out of school with, $75,000, and I told you I walked out with about 30, then inherited 22, you could be sitting on that for the next 15 to 20 years, right? People are walking out with minimally $40,000 and $50,000 of debt. This is not to deter you from going that route, but there are opportunities out there. I encourage you now, it's not too late, seniors, definitely not too late for juniors, to start researching the opportunities of what schools offer and what scholarships are available, whether directly from that school or from different sources. And you can talk to Mr. Jacobs, our scholarship coordinator, or all of your counselors anytime. Today, you're going to hear about a program through the military in which they have pretty much a lot of money to offer for commitment to the military for periods of years or for a career as well. All right, I was talking to Captain Hartman just for a little bit. Last year in his division, they cover New Jersey and Philadelphia, right? Just New Jersey, all of New Jersey? All of New Jersey and Philadelphia. Last year, just in that division, they turned back $11 million of scholarships. $11 million that could have been had but were not applied for. Right? That's just in those 2 small areas. So you multiply that all over the country. They said if they had utilized the $11 million of students who were applying for it, what they would do is they would take money that wasn't being used in California, North Dakota, Florida, wherever it was, and they could get the money for the students if they so wish to do so. There is a lot of money out there to be had to pay for education. Okay? So it's an opportunity to listen to. This is not a military recruitment, but just another check the box of doing some research of what you can do to help yourself be successful post-Lenape High School. So I'm going to introduce a gentleman, right, that's going to talk to you that has a lot of knowledge in this, that's going to present. They're also going to be available to you outside the North Cafeteria during Lunch and Learn, and this will go right up to Lunch and Learn, and then you can ask individual questions there after Captain Hartman speaks. Captain Hartman is originally from Coventry, Rhode Island. He enlisted in the United States Army through ROTC's simultaneous membership program at Texas A&M University. Captain Hartman's duty assignments have included platoon leader, executive officer, maintenance officer, and plans officer for the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment at Fort Hood, Texas. as well in Iraq in support of Operation New Dawn. He was assigned to the 173rd Infantry Brigade Combat Team, Airborne, in Vicenza, Italy, where he served as logistic officer, company commander, transportation officer, and deputy support operations officer, in addition to U.S. Army Africa assignments. Captain Hartman currently serves as the commander in Central Jersey Recruiting Company. I please wish for you to pay close attention, listen to this opportunity. If you're not interested, I get it, okay? But you just may learn something that may help you post-Lenape High School. Without further ado, Captain Hartman.
Hey, while he's getting that set up, so I'll introduce myself, but before I do that, before Sergeant First Class gentleman in the back punches me in the face after this presentation, you got a little bit of, you won't punch me in the face, I guarantee it, all right? So there's a little bit of piece of paper that they handed out to you. If you don't have one, don't really worry about it. The reason for that is I live an hour and a half away, and I had to wake up at 5 o'clock this morning, so I'm amped up on a lot of espresso. So I'm going to speak very quickly because I got about 40 minutes to change your lives potentially. And I might speak very quickly. I might drop a couple acronyms. So throughout the presentation, please write those down. And then if you want more information before you leave, whatever you do, just have respect for your school and don't throw them on the ground, or we'll recycle them, or we'll use them for different presentations. So thank you to your principal, your faculty, staff, and your superintendent for this opportunity to come talk to you. So I am the Army Recruiting Company Commander for Central New Jersey, and I'm also the Senior Joint Recruiting Officer in Central New Jersey. And what that means is we have representatives from the Army and the Marine Corps here today, but I could point you in the right direction as far as the Air Force, the Coast Guard, the Navy, et cetera, et cetera. I am not going to ask any of you to join the military today. That is not the point of today's presentation, but I was asked here today to share some information over the last 2 years that I've been in command, really the last 2.5 years of information that I have seen with regards to my generation, the millennial generation, and what is happening to them throughout the last couple years here in New Jersey. So there is absolutely a paradigm of military service here in New Jersey, and they didn't really understand it. I've been to pretty much all of the high schools, all of the colleges in the footprint, and the military service is seen as a tertiary option. Go to college, go to the workforce, get some money, go to college, or hey, if all else fails, join the military. I didn't really understand that. I live in Jersey City. On Mondays, I run past half a dozen memorials to September 11th, right next to the One World Trade Center. I can't go anywhere in this uniform and not be thanked for my service. I went to go buy a coffee from a place up in Belmore, and somebody had already paid for it before I left the little cafe. So I didn't quite understand why this paradigm existed. And this is why I think before we get into some of the competition strategies that we talk about, why that paradigm exists. So for our parents, Generation X, the conversation at the breakfast table was, hey, what college are you going to? And the better college you got into, the better, because you'd be judged for it. Then you would come home, you'd go to high school the next day and you'd be in the cafeteria with your friends, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, and you'd be like, hey, what degree plan are you going to study? It had nothing to do with anything about pursuing a passion. It had anything to do with 4 career fields: doctor, lawyer, engineer, or something on Wall Street. Why? Because those are the only careers that actually made money. It was all about money. I would never join the military, and I'd never dream of becoming a teacher. Why? Because they didn't make any money. That was the thought process. So they go to college. College was a lot more affordable, and then when they graduated, more importantly, they had the job. They had the piece of paper, and they had the job waiting for them. So you flash forward to the millennial generation, my generation, or Generation Y. Our parents fueled a college for all mentality based off the fact that they could get a job after college. So for us millennials, we had that exact same paradigm. It was, hey, go to college, get the job, and I'll be good to go. We grew up in an education system, No Child Left Behind, where we trained to a test and we really couldn't solve complex problems as part of the team. We grew up in an athletic system where you just showed up and got a participation trophy, so you didn't have that competitive chip to solve your own problems and dig yourself out of a hole. So for us, we can't really solve our own problems. We're hopelessly optimistic. We think we're going to be millionaires before we're 30, 35. And we think people are going to solve our own problems for us. But the world changed on us. We went to college like we were told to. College became a lot more competitive. In a supply and demand economy, colleges can do that. But it also became a lot more expensive. So I'm a faculty member at the College of New Jersey through the ROTC department, and they have an acceptance rate of 49%. 49% of those who apply actually get accepted to a public school here in New Jersey. Princeton University just released their admissions numbers for last year. They turned away 50 perfect SAT scores. 50 of your peers that scored perfectly on the SAT did not get into Princeton University. They have a 7% acceptance rate. It's extremely competitive. Who is your competition right now for your public schools, for example, Rutgers right now? What state? Anybody? It's not New York. It's not Pennsylvania. It's international students, and here's why. They have a 5.0 extended scale on a GPA. They score 1 million on the SAT scores, but more importantly, their parents pay cash. And in an environment where 50% of our peers do not finish school, 87% of you will go on to some post-secondary education, whether it's a 2 or 4 year program, but only 50% of you will actually finish. And that's a national statistic predominantly because of money. So paying cash is actually very, very important. Rutgers University just increased their tuition to $32,000 a year. That's in-state. And if you multiply $32,000 times 4 and you never do math in public, that's north of $120,000 for one piece of paper. Who here has brothers and sisters? I have 3. Multiply $120,000 in-state times that many number of siblings. Who here has ever asked their parents, hey, mom and dad, how much money you got for me to go to college and retire? I never did. My generation was entitled. I actually called my parents and apologized. I never once asked them how much they have saved up for retirement. Frankly, I didn't care. I'm going to college like I'm told to, and I'm going to get that job. So Money Magazine 2015, in February, they wrote an article that said for a family 5 in this footprint to fully educate your kids and retire, it costs anywhere between $1.2 and $1.4 million. In that article, it further advises your parents to retire before they send you to school and sink all of their retirement. You can look it up. I will leave these articles with your faculty and staff so you can actually fact check me afterwards, or afterwards you can pull out your smart computer, your cell phone, and fact check me afterwards. So national student debt per student, if you watched the Super Bowl last year, they said nationally it's $33,000. Here in New Jersey, it's closer to $50,000. Because colleges here in New Jersey are very good, and they know that, and they cost a lot more. So that is the national student debt. If you total up all of the credit card debt compared to the student debt per person, there's $1 trillion industry in Washington, D.C. that lobbies around student debt. There's more student debt in this country than there is credit card debt. There's actually a movie called The House with Will Ferrell that makes a comedy about the situation, the debt problem that students have faced. So this is future soldier Wilkinson. Future soldier Wilkinson had never ever seen a recruiter, never ever had a reason to walk up to them and ask them, hey, how could the military help me avoid these pitfalls? So it was very keeping up with the Joneses, his words, not mine. His parents had the car, they had the house, but they borrowed his entire undergrad education at George Washington University. It's a pretty good school in Washington, D.C. for $200,000. And there's an article by Consumer Reports called College Kinda Ruined My Life, and it's a silly title for a very serious topic. Last I talked to him, his student loan interest, he now owes $230,000 on that $200,000 loan. He is upside down in his student loans. And that is a very real problem, and this article will outline 10 of your peers in this local area that have to take a job, any job, to start paying off those student debts. Why? Because they can't show 3 of the 4 things necessary to get a job in this environment. I've been to over 50 college fairs, and I talked to most of the employers that go to them. They can find college students all day. They can throw a rock and hit a dozen. But they can't show the other 3 things that are necessary to get a job in this market. So what happened to the millennials? We went off to college, we got the degree, we have that student debt, but we couldn't get the job. We go 5, 6, 7 job interviews, and we get frustrated because we don't have any experience in our field to put our academic pursuits in context. We don't have this thing called certifications. Who remembers that woman from McDonald's who spilled coffee in her lap and sued McDonald's for like $11 million? You guys remember that? That was a really expensive cup of coffee. I read the article again. She originally sued him for $28, but it got litigated down to about $11 million. Your academic degree will not protect your employer from getting sued. It won't, but those national certifications will. You can't name a serious profession that doesn't have a degree with the appropriate certification that goes along with it. You cannot be a teacher in New Jersey or a guidance counselor without a certification in order to do that. I'm a logistics officer, so you want to talk hazardous material. The second you don't put the drip pan under the vehicle or store the batteries incorrectly, you just bought that plot of land from the EPA for $500,000. You want to do anything in finance or somebody's local record checks, you have to have a record check. I have a top secret clearance. It's good for 5 years and costs the company $70,000 to run. The NCOs that are in the back, the sergeants that are in the back have a secret clearance. It's good for 10 years and costs the company $30,000 to run. You want to do anything in cybersecurity, there's 3 national certifications. The list goes on and on and on. If you want to be an engineer like the Marine in the back, you have to have a project management certification. Those are the certifications that you need to have. And if you bring those to the table, you're already more valuable to that company. Thirdly, and you'll just have to take my word on this, is called the intangibles, or what businesses call the gray or soft skills. I call them the Army values, the Marines call them the Marine Corps values. Are you going to show up to work on time and not be drunk or high? And I hope you guys understand there's absolutely a drug epidemic here in New Jersey through opioids. I had a future soldier, an applicant in my office in Willingboro last week, and I saw it, and he's fidgeting on his phone. It's a very real problem in this footprint. We have a zero tolerance policy for it in the military, period. You will get drug tested in every major corporation and business that you go to apply for. For me, I tried to get a part-time job over the summer driving a forklift at Lowe's. You know what the first thing they did to me was? They swabbed my mouth for a drug test. So even if New Jersey legalizes marijuana, do you think you're going to get a job? Absolutely not, because you are a risk to that company. If there's supply chain management, you will steal all of their stuff to sell it to get that high. You absolutely will. You will be a safety risk to the team in that company. Are they going to hire you? Absolutely not. So things to consider. Are you going to have respect for the other races and creeds and genders that are in your workspace? Are you going to stand up, put your arm around them when you see somebody being violated with that, and take action and say, hey, that's not cool, I got your back, and report it? Those are the intangibles or the gray skills or soft skills that businesses are looking at millennials generally can't provide. And generally, it is that 4-year degree. There's a 7-minute YouTube video. I encourage everybody, don't do it while you're driving home today, maybe on the bus or when you get home, called Success in the New Economy. You can YouTube it. It's 7 minutes. It's going to outline, it's not an Army video, those 4 things and the problems that are facing the millennial generation. So we can't go 5, 6, 7 job interviews, and we get frustrated. We get stuck in what's called the gray collar. And the gray collar is taking any job just to pay your medical expenses and your student loans. I challenge the NCOs in here to go to a Wawa, Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks. The next 25-year-old, well-dressed, clearly articulate, looks you in the eye when they hand you your cup of coffee, ask them one question. What's your degree? They'll absolutely tell you. My battalion commander who's standing over here told me a story the other day. He met a waiter with a 3.5 GPA from Rutgers with a physics degree waiting tables because he couldn't get a job in his field. It's alive and well. It's called the gray collar message that's here. Who here has ever asked their parents how much they pay in medical expenses or medical insurance? Anybody? I have a couple normally. I honestly have to ask because in the military, I don't pay for medical insurance or life insurance or dental insurance for my wife and I. Most families of 5, pay $400 a month with a $1,200 deductible for one wellness check. And under the current system, if you don't have health care, guess what? You get taxed on it come April. You're paying for it one way or another. So that is the problem with the gray collar, and that's why my generation generally just gets frustrated taking a job, any job, but they're not building those 3 things. They have that degree, but they're not being competitive. So for you, what generation are you? Has anybody told you you're not Generation Y or millennials? It's almost a derogatory term. Who are you? You guys are Generation Z. And sociologists say you guys are going to be the next greatest generation. So you were born around, your generation, they say, was born around 95, 96. Everybody in this room should be born around 2000, 2001. So they say you have a different perspective of service. And not just military service, any service. You guys experienced the last 16 years of your military being deployed globally against the war on terrorism, generally for something good. Compared to my father and grandfather who came home in the Vietnam generation, I came home from Iraq to a completely different environment. They say that you are digital natives. In 2006, I joined this thing called Facebook when you could only have a .edu email address, and I did it so I could keep up with my friends in Rhode Island when I would come home from the summer. Can you guys go 5 minutes without knowing a world event? Because you have that supercomputer in your back pocket that we asked you to turn off. It's your smartphone, and you can validate everything that I could say right now by just pulling out your supercomputer in your back pocket. You guys are thinking differently, and that's because you are digital natives, and it's actually pretty cool. My cousin, who's in middle school right now, he called me and said, hey, I just got thrown out of school because I got in a shouting match with one of my female classmates. For whatever reason, he is a self-proclaimed Democrat and she was a self-proclaimed Republican. They knew exactly who the presidential candidates were and roughly what their policies were. And they got a shouting match over it. I didn't care who the president was until 2008 when I became a lieutenant in the Army and that person became my boss and I took a vested interest. My nephew, who is 5 years old, my sister gives him a new piece of technology and he's got that thing up and running in 10 minutes because he goes on YouTube and checks out how to do it. You guys are digital natives and it's causing you guys to think very differently. Rider University, has anybody heard of that university? It costs $50,000 a year to go to that school up near Trenton. They are losing $13 million a year in declined enrollments because of the way that you guys are thinking. You can validate everything on your phone, so hey, how do I know I want to pursue something I'm not even passionate about and seek my parents' retirement? And there's a competition strategy that we will talk about that here in a minute. So now that I've attempted to put everything into context for you, why are you sitting here for this 30-minute presentation? I could sit up here and tell you, I could talk your ear off for 45 minutes about my Army story. I was in the Armor Brigade. I helped people blow stuff up with 80-ton tanks. I thought it was pretty cool. I've air assaulted out of helicopters. I've jumped out of an airplane 26 times in 6 different countries. But I don't want to talk about me. To put this all into context, I want to talk about the young lady I met the second week on the job up at Picatinny Arsenal by the name of Carolyn. And my recruiters are all excited, say, hey, sir, you got to go talk to her. She's got a pretty cool story. So I was like, okay. So I walk up to her, shake her hand. She said, hey, sir, my name is Caroline. I'm a sergeant up at Picatinny. I run the hospital, and I'm in charge of 9 soldiers. Okay, well, I'm not overly impressed with that, so okay. Well, sir, I think your recruiters want me to talk to you because I'm in my 3rd year medical school and I'm number 3 in my class. Yeah, absolutely. How did you do that? I'm super interested in that. Well, sir, I was a junior and I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor because I'd watched Grey's Anatomy for the last 10 years of my life and I thought it looked cool. I never set a broken bone, never stopped bleeding, never did anything medically. So how do I know I really want to become a doctor? Thirdly, I knew how expensive it was. I had 2 brothers at the time, or she had 2 brothers at the time, and mom and dad might be able to pay for her to go to Rutgers for her undergrad in biology. But she knew that her parents would struggle in order to do it for her 2 brothers. She also knew that medical school was extremely, extremely expensive, and mom and dad were not going to be able to pay for that. Thirdly, she wanted a competition strategy, and I didn't know what she was talking about at that time, but after 2 years and talking to 11 universities, to include Princeton University, up there in Trenton, I absolutely know now what she's talking about. Because of that 50% retention rate issue that a lot of schools are having right now, they are looking for service members. She wanted a competition strategy in order to get in that school. This is not a cheat strategy. Every university in this footprint gets hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in grant money from the federal government, and that grant money is tied to the number of service members that go to that school. So that was her competition strategy that she wanted to pursue. So she enlisted her junior year as a medic, as a 68 Whiskey, a combat medic. In the Army, we like to throw combat in front of everything, and though it has nothing to do with combat. She goes to basic training between her junior and senior summer, where she earns 9 college credits. She comes back her senior year. She applies to Rutgers Biology as a service member and gets in. Then she goes to advanced individual training. The Air Force calls it advanced school along with the Navy, and she gets certified nationally as a paramedic. And she gets 29 college credits, 9 plus the 29. She transfers all of that into Rutgers. She starts as an academic sophomore. It's never parallel when you're going to go to college when you join the military. The second you go off to basic training, you get college credit. So for her, she goes off to her freshman year at Rutgers, her first summer. Her first 2 weeks during the summer, she goes down to Hawaii, where she works in the emergency room. She learns how all that works. The following summer, she worked at Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C., where she worked in the recovery room, and she learned how the emergency room tied into the recovery room. Her third summer, she said it was boring. She had to stay at Fort Dix and clean equipment, her words, not mine. And then her following summer, she was 3 weeks in Kosovo, where she was the non-commissioned officer in charge of the field hospital there. She said, "Sir, I'm not number 3 in my class necessarily because I'm smarter than everybody. I have my entire profession in context. So when I walk into a hospital or the classroom, my peers see me as a leader. I'm not afraid of what I'm actually walking into. I know how the emergency room ties into the recovery room, how pharmacy, x-ray, ophthalmology all tie in to support that. How important it is to put the right doctor and nurse together on third shift, because if they don't get along, it's going to be miserable for everybody." So that was how I'm putting that into context for you. So going into this, and how can the military help you overcome the pitfalls that happened to my generation, the millennial generation? Even if I wanted everybody in here to join the military, 70% of you are not qualified. That's a national statistic. 70% of you would not even be qualified for military service. I want you to go to college. As a military officer, it's in my best interest to make sure that my civilian leadership is as well educated as possible. You guys got to understand that college is extremely competitive. It's also very expensive. 70% of you don't qualify for military service because you predominantly can't pass the ASVAB. Who here has actually taken the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery? A couple people? Right now, out until I think 2019, it's the equivalency for the park. So if you pass the ASVAB, you could pass the park. High five, you can graduate high school. But what most people don't know is the number one determiner for your vocational aptitude, how well you're going to do in a career. So for me, I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. I went off to Texas A&M University because it was significantly cheaper than going to school in Rhode Island. I used to doodle airplanes in high school. I paid attention, and I took all the right math classes. But I had my TI-83 calculator with all the equations stored in it, plus it helped my girlfriend at the time was a math whiz. So I passed all of my high school math, so I thought I was good to go. So I went off to aerospace engineering at Texas A&M, and no one ever told me, hey, PJ, you actually suck at math. So I went off to school, and I took 5 classes, 3 of them, engineering, physics, and calculus. What do you think my GPA was? It was a 1.6 GPA. I bombed 3 out of my 5 classes. And it set me up for failure going into it. So why do we use the ASVAB in the military? Before I go off and put $22 million in an 18-year-old's hands through training and equipment, I kind of want to make sure that the person's going to do well in that trade. So for you, how could you use that information to set you up while you're in high school? Well, maybe you, for the juniors in here, you understand what you're good at and what you're not so good at, and you take different classes while you're here in high school to set yourself up for success. For your seniors, maybe you go to community college and get some remedial classes or knock out all your electives before you go off to that 4-year college of your dreams so you can have the best GPA possible. And we'll talk why it's important to have a really good GPA in college when you come out. The second part of the ASVAB is called the Career Exploration Program. So for those who have taken the ASVAB, who has done the Career Exploration Program? Nobody? So after you take the ASVAB and you give it an authentic try and you just don't do C all the way down, the sergeants in the back can come back in and tell you, hey, this is what you're good at and what you're not so good at. Do you think that's some information that you want? It has nothing to do with joining the military. The ASVAB you could take here in high school and you don't actually have to release your information to me. I would love for you to get your information so I can have a conversation with you. But it's a free tool for you. You will absolutely know where you're joining the military when a sergeant back there picks you up and takes you to Fort Dix and you're on a red carpet and somebody like me says, raise your right hand and repeat after me. You will absolutely know when you're joining the military. So 15 years ago, we realized that the national statistic for people to pass the ASVAB is extremely low. So we developed this thing called March to Success. And March to Success is a free online web-based, there's an app for your phone that helps train people on their SAT and ACT scores. It's completely free. We use it to shake the rust off of our applicants before they take the ASVAB so they can have the best possible score. You laugh, I'm on my 7th Rutgers grad that has to apply for a waiver because they can't pass the math on the ASVAB because you can't use a calculator. 2 weeks ago, I had a young lady with a 3.6 GPA from Fairleigh Dickinson University bomb the ASVAB. Single-digit scores. This is Brian. He scored a 9 on the practice test. And you laugh, you're like, wow, Brian's not that smart. But it happens all the time. Some parts of New Jersey is closer to 83% that can't pass my aptitude battery in order to join my team. So he did this program for 3 weeks, and he tripled his score from a 9 to a 33. Not only was he able to graduate from high school, but he ended up deciding, hey, I want to be essentially a missile scientist for the Army, and he became a Patriot maintainer as a 14 Tango, which is something that Sergeant Frederick in the back does as well. So what we could do for you is we could set up classes here before, during, and after school, help you enroll. Your guidance counselors could do it as well, and they can also provide mentorship so that you can actually log in and they see what you're doing well at and what you're not doing so well at. You take a practice test, and it's going to tell you, hey, you're good at this, you're not so good at this. It'll automatically enroll you in modules. The key to this, though, is you have to show the discipline initiative to actually get on this and actually use it. It works, and Brian's a perfect example of how to do that. So for a competition strategy, this is Chris. Chris went to Red Bank High School. He applied to 2 schools. He had a pretty good GPA and a pretty good SAT and ACT score. This is a competition strategy, not a cheat strategy. So he applied early acceptance to the University of Rhode Island and the University of Michigan. He really wanted to go to the University of Michigan, and I'll take this one as a punch in the gut being from Rhode Island. URI has a pretty good engineering program, but it pales in comparison to the University of Michigan. So he applied, he got into URI, did not get into Michigan. So after hearing a similar presentation like this, he went up to Sergeant Simpson and said, hey, you talked about something called the Concurrent Admissions Program and that competition strategy as a service member to get into the school of my dreams. Yeah, absolutely. So Chris enlisted in the part-time option, the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. Every service has a reserve component. As a 42 Alpha or human resources specialist, pay, finances, legal, that kind of thing. And he reapplied to the University of Michigan. Sergeant Simpson picks up the phone and he calls the Veterans Affairs Department up at the University of Michigan and says, Chris is now reapplying as a service member. The VA walks it over to admissions and says, Chris is now a service member. He got in and he started this fall at the University of Michigan. That is a competition strategy. Who here has heard of the service academies? West Point, Annapolis Air Force Academy? Pretty good schools. West Point was ranked, I think 5 years ago, the #1 university in the country. It's a really difficult school to get into, and it's very good. So Lieutenant Campbell, or Jim, he applied to West Point as a senior out of Middletown North, I believe. He didn't get in. He had the GPA, he had the SAT scores. So how competitive is it to get into West Point? So we went up to West Point and said, hey, there's a competition strategy for normal colleges as a service member. Does that apply to the West Point? Yeah, absolutely. There's 187 slots that we have for prior service applications, and we don't use about a third of them. They just go unused. So what Lieutenant Campbell did was, he applied again as a service member after enlisting in the reserve component in special operations is a job called civil affairs specialist because he thought it'd be cool to jump out of airplanes on the weekends on Fort Dix. And then he reapplies as a service member. He got a battalion commander's signature similar to Colonel Tuzak and Colonel Bryan over here. They become the congressional nomination for him in order to go to school. Well, how hard is it to get a congressional nomination? So we went to a congressman up in Morris County and said, hey, sir, how many applications to West Point do you get a year? I get 2,000 applications every single year for my 4 congressional nominations. My staff whittles it down from 50 for a telephonic interview. We bring 10 in for a face-to-face to give away 4 congressional nominations. You can see how competitive it is to get into one of these service academies. And he did it as a competition strategy, and all of the services have this competition strategy. So this is Emily. This is what your principal was talking about, and one of the reasons why Colonel Bryan and I went to the lieutenant governor at the time and said, hey, ma'am, this is almost criminal. So Emily, she's got a sister and a brother. She applies to those 3 schools up there, Drexel, Temple, and St. Joseph's. How much does it cost to go to Drexel right across the river in Philly? Anybody? Somebody said 60. Let's start going up. 72,000. Who said it? Somebody over there? Good for you. It costs $72,000 a year in-state to go to Philadelphia. Do the math. Times that by 4. That's a lot of money. Emily knew that her parents couldn't afford for her and her siblings in order to go to school. So she applied to what's called the Minuteman Scholarship. That $287,000 right there, I turned in 38 of those scholarships. That's about $11 million that went unused last year. So she applied for that scholarship. She used the competition strategy to get into Drexel University. She becomes a simultaneous membership cadet like I did, and she gets paid $800 to $1,200 in her pocket a month to go to school. I sold plasma while I was in college for $50 a week, and she gets $1,200 a month in order to go to Drexel. And that covers tuition, housing, and fees in order to go to that school. If you're a service member, you can actually go to school at the in-state rate in Pennsylvania as well. So what is she not using? I used tuition assistance for my bachelor's degree when I went off to A&M after I found the Army simultaneous membership program. I used my post 9/11 GI Bill to pay for my first master's degree, and I just found out yesterday that I got accepted to grad school that the Army's paying for me to do. So I've been to over 37 countries. I don't have to pay for medical insurance or life insurance. I can hop on an airplane with the Air Force over there at McGuire Air Force Base for $10 and fly anywhere in the world, space available. If you do the math, I have a pension in which I could collect starting in 9 years that's worth $3.2 million out to my life expectancy of 87 years old. So I think it's been pretty successful for me and my family. So that paradigm that existed for military service, I don't really understand why it is there. So actually, Sergeant Denham, the same guy that told you he was going to punch me in the face, actually told me my number up here is actually incorrect. It's not $65,000 for your post 9/11 GI Bill. It covers all of your tuition and fees for your school plus housing. So Rutgers, $32,000 a year times 4, it's actually closer to $130,000 for your post 9/11 GI Bill. And it depends on what school that you actually go to and what state, and it adjusts accordingly. So what can Emily do with that post 9/11 GI Bill? She can go to grad school like I did. She could give it to her spouse if she decides to get married one day, or she could give it to her kids. She's 18 years old. You could transfer your GI Bill to your family. So for this, How do we solve the gap here? Whether you guys believe it or not, you guys are in the academic belt of the country. The Army has tasked us to come out here and find the smart kids, the guys that could do the other 146 jobs. There's 4 jobs in the military that have anything to do with combat: infantry, armor, special forces, or cavalry, or artillery. You can't name a serious profession that your military doesn't have. A young lady at Delran High School asked me if I could be a mathematician in the Army. I said, no, not in the Army, but you can absolutely do it as an officer in the Air Force. The Army's got 2 astronauts. The Army's got more boats than the Navy. You could be a cosmetologist in the Navy, which is something I found out the other day. You can't name a serious profession that your military doesn't have that you cannot pursue. And I challenge any one of you for a t-shirt or piece of swag during your lunch and learn. You come up and play Stump the Chump. I'll give you a t-shirt if you name a profession that we don't have. The Navy just put a Navy SEAL up into space as an astronaut. So there you go. So to solve the gap year problem, the Army created what's called the 2-and-2 program. You do 2 years active duty, you get your GI Bill, you transfer in the reserves, the part-time option, and you go to school. This is Malik. This is a competition strategy for medical school. I found him up in Princeton, my Princeton Center. I said, hey, Malik, what brings you in the office today? Well, I go to East Stroudsburg University on a full-ride football scholarship, but I want to go to medical school. I don't have to worry about my undergrad, but mom and dad are not going to pay for me to go to medical school. Hey, how much does it cost to go to medical school? It costs $250,000 to go to medical school, and mom and dad don't have that. He also told me that most surgeons in this country don't pay off their student debt until they're 49 years old. So for him, he joined the Army as a laboratory specialist, and he's going to use that as a competition strategy in order to get into medical school. If you get into any medical school, the Army, Air Force, and the Navy will pick up the tab. That also applies to physical therapists and lawyers as well. So these 3 individuals, this is what the problem of the gray collar. All 3 of these individuals had great grades from schools in the Philadelphia area in biomedical engineering, but they were all making less than $30,000 a year and had north of $50,000 in student debt. The Army, through the student loan repayment program, paid off all of their student debt. They enlisted as biomedical engineers, and we took them to the reserve unit. And the leaders of that reserve unit in Philadelphia are all the hiring managers for Newman's Lake Regions and Phillips. Through the partnership through Youth Success, they got jobs when they came back from AIT. Why do businesses want service members to come work for them? 1, we bring a unique perspective to that workplace, but more importantly, they get tax breaks. There's 3 categories of tax breaks that businesses get for service members. Are you a service member? Are you a combat veteran? Or are you a wounded warrior? That's why they're looking for you. It's financially incentivized for them to do that. So for law enforcement, this specialist, he ended up enlisting as a 35 Mike as a human intelligence collector. And he wanted to be a Secret Service agent. So why did he go in as a human intelligence collector? Every law enforcement agency, they're going to send you to a police academy. So what else can you bring to the table? So a human intelligence collector walks into a room and is actually able to read all of the people in there. Do you think that would be valuable to a police department? I think so. Competition strategy to John Jay University, which has an awesome criminal justice program. He applied to the NYPD as a service member through the partnership through Youth Success and through veterans hiring preferences, because the 3-letter agencies like the Secret Service, DOE, DOJ, you name it, they all by federal law have to show veterans hiring preferences. So he used that competition strategy, and that's him shaking President Obama's hand as a Secret Service intern. These 3 individuals are prime examples of the gray collar right here in Burlington County. So this is Carl Louisdon. Carl Louisdon has a master's of IT. He was making less than $30,000 a year, and he had over $60,000 in student debt, and he couldn't get promoted in his job. He was in a catch-22. He couldn't get promoted in his job because he didn't have any leadership skills. You can't get any leadership skills unless you actually get put into a leadership position. So he enlisted in the Army Reserves as a heavy equipment operator. He thought it'd be cool to drive big trucks on the weekends. The Army paid off all of his student debt, and then when he came back to tell his employer, hey, I need some time off to go to basic training at AIT, he was a specialist. He was in charge of 4 soldiers. That employer said, hey, when you get back, I'll give you that promotion because you now have leadership potential. But he didn't get 1 promotion. He got 2 promotions. He went from $30,000 a year to $120,000 a year. This is James McCarthy. James McCarthy had a 3.1 GPA. You know how I told you to pay attention to your GPA in college? Have fun, but you're there for a reason. Your GPA absolutely matters. If you don't have 3 of the 4 things that businesses are going to ask you, and this is what I learned from James, what are they going to ask you during your interviews? What college did you go to and what was your GPA? So with a 3.1 GPA in aerospace engineering, do you think he's going to get a job when he's competing with people that have 3.8s, 3.9s, and 4.0s? Absolutely not. He was drowning in his student debt and medical expenses, so he enlisted to be an officer candidate. This is Justin Price. This is almost pretty sad. He was a valedictorian in his school. He speaks 7 different languages, and we found him pretty much homeless working at a Wawa. And he said his student debt and his medical expenses were crushing him. And he couldn't get a job. He speaks 7 different languages. So for him, he enlisted. The Army paid off all his student debt, and he went into the Army active duty as a linguist. All he does is he translates for a commander like me. I speak English, and that's it. He speaks 7 different languages, and all he has to do is translate for somebody such as myself. So this is Raymond Polk. Raymond Polk was an NFL player. He played for 2 NFL teams. He couldn't get hired in the profession that he wanted to get into. He was volunteering with the Department of Homeland Security up in Hackensack. He was a scholar athlete from the University of Colorado, and he couldn't get a job in his field. So he enlisted as an officer candidate in order to become a Green Beret. So here's some of the other things that are available to you in your own backyard. In line with the academic belt of the country is the Army's Research and Development Command spread throughout the entire Northeast. They offer internships, competitions, and things of that nature. Through the East Cyber Mission, which is a program through the Army, you could get up to $50,000 in grant money for your school. There's another scholarship that awarded $58 million last year to 340 scholarships through the SMART Scholarship. And that SMART Scholarship, you don't actually have to join the military. A majority of the military is actually scientists and researchers and business professionals that actually run the Department of Defense. If you have 18 of these STEM degrees and you get into that college, the Army will pick up the tab, and all you have to do is work 2 years as a Department of the Army civilian. So you get your entire undergrad education paid off for it, you automatically get a job working for the largest corporation in the world, which is your military that employs over 3 million people throughout the entire joint picture. Going back, the second scholarship, I'll send this out, they will actually pay for your graduate school as well. Again, all you do is you owe 2 years as a Department of the Army civilian. This is that East Cyber Mission that I was talking about. You write a white paper, you design a program or improve a system, and you could get up to $50,000 for your school in grants. So in conclusion, I've got 5 minutes before you guys get out of here. I need you guys to understand the differences between your generation, my generation, and our parents' generation, and how you guys are thinking differently. I want you to understand that high school is important. It absolutely is important. For the seniors that are in this room, the kings and queens of the castle, or so you think, you can absolutely mess it up, and June's right around the corner. So keep your heads in the books, because you can absolutely mess it up. And for you juniors, you're in the right spot to actually start planning for this and go home and have those conversations so that you can actually plan accordingly. Your GPA and your SAT scores are the only 2 things you can't get back when you leave from high school, and they absolutely matter. Make yourself competitive in the new economy. Watch that video, Success in the New Economy. It's 7 minutes on YouTube. Please feel free to watch it when you get home today. And in conclusion, the military can help you get into a better college than you think. They can pay off all your student debt, both proactively and reactively. You have the Minuteman Scholarship to pay for all that. It can have you in and out of the Army in 6 years with a master's degree, such as myself, and on to a better paying job than you can think of. And before you guys leave today, your teachers, your faculty and staff do a lot of work to transform you and make you the better leaders that you're in today. We go into basic training, and afterwards parents come running up to us and say, "Oh my God, my son or daughter is awesome. Thank you so much." And honestly, we didn't really do anything. We just put you guys in an environment where your character rises to the top. So for your seniors, do something that I never did. Find your favorite coach, teacher, faculty member, and thank them for what they do on a daily basis. And with that being said, I will turn it back over to your principal, and we'll see you at the table set up during your lunch and learn period.
So I just want to reiterate something. Obviously, it's a lot of information, right? A lot of information. It's overwhelming at a lot of times in the spot you're in right now, and you're taking a lot of things in consideration of obviously your grades, location, what school's the right fit for you, but obviously that dollar amount's an impact on you. We talked about your siblings and different situations with your moms and dads and guardians and what have you. It's a challenge. Just take this one as a little bit of something to think about. You know, if you have any questions, we have a table outside the north cafeteria. You can ask the folks here representing the military, and you can get your questions answered today, and then you can follow up in a variety of different ways. Just another piece of something to do, a little bit of homework on to think about what you're doing in the future.